Working the night shift may seem peaceful, until something happens that makes you realize there are things that shouldn't be there. Anyone who has had a frightening experience knows that the silence of the night can hide much more than we imagine. And the worst part, sometimes the fear doesn't come from ghosts or urban legends, it comes from situations so real that they make us wonder, what if it happened to me? Today you'll hear terrifying stories from ordinary people who just wanted to finish their shifts in peace. From hospitals where the dead don't seem to rest, to deserted roads where something or someone lurks in the darkness, and even convenience stores where a simple customer can turn into a real nightmare. These are real stories told by those who lived through every chilling detail. But before we continue, a warning, after this video you'll never look at the night shift the same way again. So if you're watching this late at night, well, maybe it's best to leave a light on. Our first story takes us to a dimly lit hospital, where the silence of the night is often broken by the hurried footsteps of nurses and the hum of medical equipment. It's a place where life and death intersect, and for one janitor it became a terrifying stage for the unexplained. This is the story of Mark, a man who had spent years cleaning the desolate halls of Mercy Hospital, never giving much thought to the stories whispered among the staff. Whispers of room 407, a room kept permanently locked, its history shrouded in mystery. Mark, a practical man, dismissed these stories as mere superstition, the ramblings of overworked imaginations. But one sweltering summer night, his skepticism would be challenged in the most unsettling way. The air hung heavy with humidity as Mark made his rounds, the fluorescent lights buzzing above him casting long, eerie shadows on the empty corridors. As he approached the restricted wing, a cold shiver ran down his spine. The air grew noticeably colder, and a strange feeling of unease settled over him. He paused outside room 407, the door, as always, securely locked. He had heard the stories, of course, the legend of an elderly patient, abandoned by her family, who had died alone in that room. They said her anguished cries could still be heard, echoing through the dead of night. But Mark had always brushed it off until now. He could feel a presence, cold and heavy, emanating from the other side of the door. His heart pounded in his chest as he slowly raised his hand and knocked lightly. The sound echoed eerily in the silent hallway, and then he heard it. A faint scratching sound from inside the room, followed by a low, guttural growl. Fear, raw and primal, surged through him. He stumbled back, dropping his cleaning supplies to the floor with a clatter. He fumbled for his keys, his hands trembling, desperate to get away from that room, from that presence. But as he turned to flee, the door to room 407 swung open with a bang, revealing an empty, darkened room. The scratching sound had stopped, the growling ceased, leaving only a heavy silence in their wake. From that night on, Mark refused to approach room 407 again. He couldn't shake the feeling that something lingered there, something dark and malevolent trapped within those walls. Our next story takes us from the sterile halls of a hospital to the desolate backroads of rural America. This is the story of Sarah, a long-haul truck driver who had seen her fair share of strange occurrences on the open road. But nothing could prepare her for the night she found herself on a stretch of highway she had never seen before. A road that seemed to exist solely for her and the entity that pursued her. It was a moonless night, the kind that swallowed even the brightest stars, leaving Sarah alone with the hum of her engine and the faint glow of her dashboard. She was on a new route, eager to make good time, the GPS guiding her through unfamiliar territory. As she drove, she noticed the landscape changing. Gone were the rolling hills and scattered farmhouses, replaced by dense, imposing forests that pressed close to the roadside, their dark silhouettes seeming to reach out towards her truck. The air grew heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth, and a strange stillness settled over the world. It was then that she noticed the car in her rearview mirror, a sleek black sedan, its headlights piercing the darkness, holding a steady distance behind her. At first, Sarah thought nothing of it. It was a lonely stretch of road after all. But as the miles ticked by and the black sedan remained unwavering in its pursuit, a knot of unease began to twist in her gut. She tried to shake off the feeling, telling herself it was just her imagination, a trick of the darkness. But deep down, a primal instinct whispered a warning. She glanced again at her rearview mirror. The black sedan was closer now, its headlights seeming to glare at her, a predator stalking its prey. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She pressed down on the accelerator, her truck groaning in protest as she pushed it faster, desperate to put distance between herself and the pursuing car. But the sedan kept pace effortlessly, its presence a menacing shadow in her wake. She reached for her CB radio, hoping to catch a stray transmission, a voice, anything to break the suffocating silence that had descended around her. Static. Only static met her ears. She was alone. Just as panic threatened to consume her, the GPS announced, "You have reached your destination." But there was nothing around her but dense forest and the ribbon of black asphalt that stretched endlessly before her. And then, as quickly as it had appeared, the black sedan swerved sharply, vanishing down a narrow dirt track she hadn't noticed before, a path almost completely swallowed by the encroaching trees. Shaking, Sarah pulled over to the side of the road, her breaths coming in short, ragged gasps. She watched as the taillights of the sedan disappeared into the darkness, leaving her alone on that desolate stretch of highway, a road that seemed to exist solely for her and the entity that had pursued her. Chapter 3. Our next story takes us to the brightly lit aisles of an all-night convenience store, a beacon of fluorescent light and processed snacks in the vast darkness. For Alex, a young man working the graveyard shift, it was supposed to be just another night of ringing up purchases and restocking shelves. He never expected to become the captive audience to a terrifying encounter, one that would leave him questioning the nature of reality itself. The night had been slow, eerily quiet. Outside, the wind howled like a banshee, rattling the windows of the store. Inside, the only sounds were the gentle hum of the refrigerators and the occasional crinkle of a snack bag being opened. Alex was lost in thought, mindlessly wiping down the counter when the bell above the door chimed, announcing the arrival of a customer. He glanced up, expecting to see the usual late-night straggler, a truck driver looking for coffee, or a teenager craving a sugary fix. But the man who stood before him was like no one Alex had ever seen before. He was tall and gaunt, his skin stretched tautly over his bones, giving him a skeletal appearance. His eyes, deep-set and hollow, seemed to burn with an unnatural intensity, boring into Alex's very soul. He wore a long black coat that seemed to swallow him whole, and a wide-brimmed hat obscured his features, casting his face in perpetual shadow. The man approached the counter, his movements slow and deliberate, each step filled with an unnerving purpose. "Can I help you?" Alex asked, his voice barely a whisper, his heart pounding against his ribs like a trapped bird. The man remained silent, his piercing gaze fixed on Alex. Then, without a word, he reached into his coat and placed a single white feather on the counter. The feather seemed to pulse with an eerie energy, its whiteness almost blinding in the harsh fluorescent light of the store. Alex stared at the feather, his mind reeling, unable to comprehend the situation unfolding before him. The man, still silent, retrieved the feather from the counter and tucked it back into his coat. Then, with a final, lingering look that sent shivers down Alex's spine, he turned and walked out of the store, disappearing into the night as quickly and silently as he had arrived. Shaking, Alex stumbled to the security monitor, rewinding the footage, desperate to make sense of what he had just witnessed. But the security footage revealed nothing. The man, the encounter, the feather, it was as if it had never happened. From that night on, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that he had been marked, singled out by something ancient and unknowable. He had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had looked back. Chapter 4. Our final story of the night takes us to the bustling heart of an emergency call center, where lives hang in the balance, and every second counts. This is the story of Emily, a seasoned 911 dispatcher, a woman accustomed to hearing tales of tragedy and despair. But nothing could prepare her for the night she received a call from a place that no longer existed, a call from beyond the grave. The storm raged outside, a symphony of wind and rain battering against the windows of the call center. Emily sat at her station, headset in place, the glow of the computer screen illuminating her face, her fingers poised over the keyboard. The night had been a whirlwind of accidents, domestic disputes, and false alarms. She had just hung up from a particularly harrowing call, a young mother pleading for help as her house burned around her, when the line crackled back to life. "911, what's your emergency?" Emily asked, her voice calm and steady, a stark contrast to the chaos that swirled around her. But the voice that answered sent a chill down her spine. It was a man's voice, raspy and weak, as if he were struggling to breathe. But it was the words he spoke that sent a wave of ice through her veins. "Please, help me. I'm trapped. In the old Miller building. On Elm Street." Emily's blood ran cold. The Miller building had been demolished years ago, reduced to rubble after a devastating fire. "Sir, can you repeat your location?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to remain professional. "The Miller Building, on Elm Street, please." "Hurry!" The line went dead. Emily's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up the address. The screen confirmed her worst fears. The Miller Building no longer existed. She tried to rationalize the call, attributing it to a prankster, a drunk dialing the wrong number, anything but the terrifying truth that her gut screamed at her. But deep down, she knew. She had received a call from a place that no longer existed, a desperate plea for help from beyond the grave. Now tell me, do you still think the night is just another part of the day? Or is it in those dark, quiet hours that things we can't explain really come to life? What's more terrifying, the unknown, or what's right in front of us but we choose to ignore? If you've ever experienced something strange during the night, share your story in the comments. And if this kind of content keeps you hooked, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Now, the next time you find yourself alone at night, are you really alone?